Good morning. There was a lot of conversation, so I had a louder rap than usual. I'm calling to order our regularly scheduled meeting of the Committee of the Whole. My name is Elizabeth Glidden, and I'm the chair of this committee. And I am joined today by council members Cano, Reich, Bender, Quincy, Borsami, Goodman, Fry, and Palmisano, and we are a quorum of this committee. We have 3 items on our agenda for today. The first is a presentation by Human Resources and the City Attorney's Office regarding a proposed charter amendment relating to classified service eligibility register. And I'm not sure who is Ms. Ferguson. If it's you, then you want to introduce the item? And okay.
Chair Glidden and members of the committee, I will be joined by Susan Siegel, the city attorney, and Charles Bernardi, who is with the Human Resources Department. This is regarding the Rule of 3, and the definition of what that rule is. It refers to the number of candidates that can be certified to a hiring manager for consideration. Applicants are scored based on their qualifications, and candidates with the highest scores are certified to the hiring manager. Then the hiring manager must choose from among the 3 candidates. A candidate below the top 3 scoring applicants may not be selected for the positions. A little bit of background regarding the Rule of 3. The Rule of 3 was established prior to the human resources as a profession. And it assumes that one may test for all attributes and characteristics that may be desirable in a candidate. It may favor candidates that do test well, and it may not take into consideration sound human resource selection principles. I'm going to now turn a portion of the presentation over to City Attorney Susan Siegel.
All right, welcome, Ms. Siegel. Thank you, Ms. Ferguson.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, the history of the Rule of 3 here is that originally the Minneapolis City Charter had the Rule of 1, and that means that on an exam process, you rank the applicants for a position, for hiring, or for promotion, and whoever scored the top, even if there's hundredths of a point difference, you were required to hire that top person. A special law was passed in 1978 to expand the Rule of 1 to the Rule of 3, and one of the members of our Charter Commission actually was our city clerk, I think, at the time, and was involved in that and discussed that at the Charter Commission. This proposal did pass unanimously out of the Charter Commission. That Rule of 3 was incorporated in our plain language charter that went into effect last year. The proposal here is to simply remove the Rule of 3 from the charter, supersede the state special law, and give to the council the authority to decide what kind of certification procedure should be by ordinance. I think the city of Minneapolis and the city of Bloomington are the only 2 cities that I'm aware of that have in their charter and or by special law dictated what kind of certification procedures there will be. And the city of Bloomington has Rule of the Left, which is a very flexible rule. So it's simply to take it out of the charter, to supersede the special law, and to put it in the hands of the city council by ordinance to determine how the eligibility list for hiring and for promotions will be handled. questions have arisen about what about collective bargaining agreements, and if a provision is in a collective bargaining agreement, that would govern, regardless of whatever the ordinance was that was passed by the city. Collective bargaining agreements get their authority from state law, and so the collective bargaining agreement would govern that procedure. It would not supersede anything. Now we do have at least one bargaining agreement that violates the state special law. And so we're in a bit of an untenable position, and we have been for a while. An individual could sue, claiming that their rights under the special law were violated the way the status quo is now.
Thank you.
I'd like to talk a little bit about why this is important. Some may be wondering, over and beyond what City Attorney Siegel said, why this is important for your consideration. Earlier, I mentioned that the Rule of Three was established before human resources was a profession. And one of the things that the Rule of Three, having the testing component, does, while it may look at an individual's ability to take the test, which is important, it doesn't take into consideration skills that are needed in today's diverse workforce in terms of looking at the soft skills that people need, the cultural competency skills people need, and also other skills such as supervisory leadership or critical thinking skills. That's one reason. But the other reason why we really believe that this is important is because this really does support the city's goals and values around One Minneapolis, a city that works, and around equity, creating fair and just opportunities and outcomes for all. In terms of hiring and selecting, having the flexibility to interview a sufficient number of qualified candidates increases our ability to continue and build a highly qualified workforce. There have been some questions with regard and some concerns regarding what do we have in place, what safeguards do we have in place to ensure that we have a fair and equitable process. Well, since the original ordinance of the Rule of Three went through, the city has a number of safeguards within its policies. One is our ethics ordinance. Another one is a nepotism policy that the city of Minneapolis passed quite a few years ago. We also have a civil service appeals process that was recently revised in late 2015. In addition, we have discrimination, harassment, and retaliation protections. We have the Human Resources Investigations Unit. We have the Minneapolis Department of Civil Rights, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and the Minnesota Department of Human Rights. Some possible next steps could be, we've already started that in the Human Resources Department. We had an initial meeting with the Labor Management Committee May 12th of this year, and we are working to develop and talk with our various stakeholders, our employees, leaders, and hiring managers to get additional information, and that information would be used to really help us gather and make some recommendations regarding any procedures that would need to be changed.
All right. Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Ms. Ferguson? I am not seeing any. I just want to confer, thank you. I just want to confer with the clerk. What I have in my notes is that we need to set a public hearing, and I think we missed getting that into the specifics of the agenda here. So my note said that it was July 20th was the date, but if we need to give notice of setting the public hearing and then give that date on at Friday's council meeting, we could do that as well, I think.
I think July 20 sounds good. I'm looking at the timeline, but July 20 sounds good.
Okay. And just for council members to know, there was a lot of work to identify the date, because there are very strict requirements about how much time you need to have after giving notice, and lots of complicated timelines. In addition to that, the clerk's office has been checking with everyone's offices to confirm that we will have 13 council members who are available to vote on the proposed charter change when it would then come to the city council. And hang on just a second. I know Councilmember Goodman has a question, because it would be then the 22nd of July that we would, as a full council, need to vote on that. So the public hearing would be the 20th in the Committee of the Whole. The 22nd would be the date when we need to confirm there are 13 council members who are available and have the opportunity to vote. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just think this is a huge issue, and I am very strongly in favor of moving forward. And the reason I'm asking this question is because only one person could say no. So do we know that everybody else, at least to some extent, shares that opinion? Or are we scheduling all of these things knowing one or two people are going to say no and we're not going to get the 13-0 vote anyway? And then are we prepared immediately to put it on the ballot? I mean, you know, I don't want to get into the merits of it. I will just say that this is not making a change. It's getting it out of the charter to allow us to talk to the stakeholders about what kind of change we would have. And so I just think I would actually make the change, but I think it's hugely important for our city and our workforce going forward. And so I just want to know what our plan is to get it on the ballot if we can't get the 13-0 vote, and can we do that at the same time, or how is that going to work?
So thank you for that. And I think that's also just a good heads up to colleagues that your opinion is very, very important on this, because, as Councilmember Goodman said, 13 council members must vote in favor of a change for it to happen under this process. This is one of these things where at the presentation to the Charter Commission, several of the Charter Commissioners actually brought up the fact that it seems that having our personnel practices in the charter is not the best place for us to be able to work with all of our stakeholders and update them as the times require. And so that is just another issue for folks to think about. Councilmember Gordon, I think, has a question, and then Ms. Siegel may want to answer the question about should 13 council members not be in agreement on this change. What would be the options for putting this on the ballot? Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. I didn't really have a question. I just wanted to indicate that I'm very supportive of this as well. I haven't heard of any council members so far who aren't, and removing this out of the charter is a small step towards the final solution. So, but this is something that I've heard about since I've been on the council, about how it's been problematic in terms of flexibility and diversifying our workforce, and those things being restricted by the rule of three. So it seemed like Councilmember Goodman was testing the waters, and so there's at least one response for you. I'm very supportive of doing this.
Okay. I'm not seeing others who have questions. There are just a couple other things that I wanted to say about this. One is that working with our partners in labor in the city on this is important. We have been reaching out. We have heard some feedback that being able to review and vet with those partners what might be a replacement ordinance language in this time frame before the public hearing takes place would be important, and we want to make sure that we have a good opportunity to do that with our stakeholders. So I just wanted council members as well as the public to understand we think, and I believe that that is an important part of the process, and for us to be able to do that work in advance of the public hearing, which is being set quite a ways out. It is being set for July 20th to allow us to vote on this July 22nd. So those are some of our intentions moving forward and working with the Board of Business Agents. So with that, and without seeing Ms. Siegel, I guess there was one other question about the ability to place this on the ballot should there not be the support of 13 council members.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, if, and the council does now have to vote under the state law because this has been formally transmitted by the Charter Commission. And if it fails at the council, then there's a couple of different avenues for this to be placed on the ballot, either by the Charter Commission directly or by City Council. But that would have to start the process anew, and it would, if we were to put it on a regular election ballot without having to call a special election, it would be the 2017 municipal election would be the earliest time that it could be put on the ballot.
All right, thank you very much. So with that, I would move to set the public hearing for this matter for July 20th. All in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That item is set. And then I think we just need to receive and file the presentation. So move to receive and file. All in approval, please say aye. Aye. And that item is received. So thank you very much for your assistance in the presentation this morning. So our next item is a presentation from the City Coordinator's Office regarding our Transgender Issues Work Group and the in a resolution that has been titled the Transgender Equity Resolution. Ms. Nuria Rivera Vandermeid is going to make a very brief presentation, and then I want to note that we have many members of our Transgender Issues Work Group who have joined us here today, and I just want to say thank you so much. It is a group that includes many people across the city enterprise as well as some outside stakeholders, and I think we're going to have some speakers as well from that group to talk about the work of the group and the resolution. So, Ms. Rivera Vandermeid.
Thank you. So my name is Nuria Rivera Vandermeid. I'm the Deputy City Coordinator, and I prefer the pronouns she and her. I stand before you quite humbly, really representing the amazing work of many in our community and many of our staff who have fought to bring the voice to the issues and concerns affecting the lives of so many of our transgender residents throughout the city. The City of Minneapolis has a long history of protecting our transgender and gender nonconforming community, and in furtherance of these efforts, established a Transgender Issues Work Group in March of 2014. The goal of this work group was to look broadly at issues affecting the lives of transgender residents, including themes around public safety, employment, health, and civic participation, to name just a few. The work group is comprised of participants across several departments, the City Council's office, and I notably want to call out Council Vice President Glidden's office, the Mayor's office, the Park Board, and the community at large, some of which are here with us today. Since the group's establishment in 2014, the Transgender Issues Work Group has hosted 2 successful trans equity summits, and work is underway to host a 3rd later this fall, focused on employment and workforce issues. The work is in addition to ongoing efforts aimed at increasing training and awareness about transgender issues across the enterprise, as well as identifying specific work that the city can undertake right now to continue to promote transgender equity in the workplace. The past year has seen an unprecedented amount of news focused on transgender issues, and unfortunately, not all of it has been positive. As many of you heard in the mayor's recent State of the City speech, even our state faces some huge disparities, and I'll quote here, 77% of transgender people report experience harassment on the job, 27% of transgender kids in school report being assaulted, and 43% of the trans people surveyed report attempting suicide, compared to 1.6% of the general population. There is much work to be done to address these realities, but I hope I speak for the group in saying that we are proud to be part of a city that has continuously protected and defended the rights of our transgender residents, a city that has demonstrated itself to be a firm ally in the hard work of fostering better understanding of transgender issues across our enterprise and our communities, and a city that continues to find ways to ensure that all its residents have their voices heard. To continue to advance and formalize this work, the City Coordinator's Office has been asked to help staff the Transgender Issues Work Group, and given the focus on enterprise issues, the multi-department engagement, and the connection with our ongoing equity work, we agreed that it would be a good fit with our existing work. In meeting with the work group, we also thought that this was a good moment to affirm the group's valuable work and put forward a resolution for your consideration that voices the city's continued support for these efforts and supports the creation of a permanent advisory body in accordance with the city's open appointment process that would foster continued work throughout the enterprise and assist staff in moving forward policies and procedures that support the transgender community that we serve. I've already taken way too much time, as there are those who speak to this issue much more eloquently than I. I pass that over to our first speaker, Andrea Jenkins, who is our first ever oral historian for the Transgender Project at the University of Minnesota.
So thank you. As we are welcoming up Andrea, and hello, Andrea.
Hello,
I just want to say that the genesis of this work and the formation of the Transgender Issues Work Group is because of Andrea's initiative.
Oh, wow.
And when this work group began, Andrea was working in City Hall. She was a longtime policy aide. I'm proud to say she worked in the 8th Ward, but she was known on very much her own merits. And thank you so much for inspiring us to be, at the city, to be an important part of this work together with community. So thank you, Andrea.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and good morning, distinguished committee members. It is my great and distinct honor and pleasure to address you this morning in recognition of the proposed resolution that enshrines the City of Minneapolis's commitment to continuing to support the transgender and gender nonconforming residents in the City of Minneapolis. At a time when transgender people are under attack legislatively in places like Texas, Tennessee, North Carolina, and several other states around this country, including our own state of Minnesota, and when 11 trans people of color have been murdered thus far this year, this is the right time to make this statement. I just want to thank Council Vice President Elizabeth Glidden for her vision and commitment to the transgender community and to this transgender issues work group, and for proposing this transgender equity resolution that I believe will help to move important proposals forward in the future. I also want to thank the mayor's office and several city departments, including the city coordinator's office, the civil rights department, human resources, Department of Public Health, Minneapolis Police Department, and several others for their support of the Transgender Issues Work Group. And it feels so good to see so many people here today in recognition of this resolution. And so I just ask that you please support this resolution and the ensuing proposals to come. And I thank you for your time. And now I want to introduce my dear friend and colleague and the 2016 Grand Marshal of the Pride celebration here in Minneapolis, Roxanne Anderson.
Right. Welcome, Roxanne Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair and council members of the council. And thank you to my beautiful, loving friend, Andrea. My name is Roxanne Anderson, and today I am here to say that I am so proud of my city council. I'm proud of the hard work that the city of Minneapolis does, and I'm especially proud of the work of the City of Minneapolis Transgender Issues Work Group. I'm honored to have served on this group since it started, and I represent lots of different entities, and I wear some different hats in that group. I represent most of the businesses at 3405 Chicago. Two of those are nonprofits, including the Minnesota Transgender Health Coalition and Rare Productions, and my own cafe, Cafe Southside. which is the only for-profit business in that building. This building is special. It's owned by a Latina woman who lives in the wards represented here today. I feel so honored to be part of this leadership representing Outfront Minnesota. I'm grateful for the leadership of my friend Andrea Jenkins, and I feel very proud to be part of the work in the both 8th and 9th ward. Almost daily in one of these roles, I connect with trans folks, connecting them to resources, helping them fill out job applications, helping them connect with friends and other resources. Transgender people in Minnesota are rich. We're rich with culture, we're strong, and we're resilient. And with the leadership and work of the mayor's office, the city coordinators, human resources, and all the different groups that connect to make the city of Minneapolis transgender work group the special and exciting piece that it is, I feel privileged. So I just want to say thank you for all this opportunity to move forward the rich assets of transgender people that live in Minneapolis.
Thank you very much. And I believe we have one more. Do you want to introduce?
One more speaker from the mayor's office, Philippe Cunningham.
All right. Welcome, Philippe Cunningham.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Philippe Cunningham, and I stand before you as an out and proud Black, gay, transgender man, and my preferred pronouns are he and him. In 2014, only a few months after moving to Minneapolis from Chicago, I attended the city's first Trans Equity Summit led by the amazing Andrea Jenkins. But in all honesty, I had to drag myself there because at the time I was a youth worker in a low-paid fellowship, and I was also working overnights to make ends meet. But I knew that this summit was too big of a deal to not witness. I could never have imagined seeing a city government taking the lead on addressing transgender issues like this. At the time, I was also interested in gaining a larger interest in exploring how I could make a difference through public policy, and this was a big opportunity to do just that. Unsure of what to expect, I figured if nothing else, I could meet some cool people from the trans community. From the start of the summit, I was absolutely astonished. As a new resident to the city, here I was watching the mayor and city council president as opening speakers at a trans event. Both spoke of having transgender people close to them in their lives and how much these people really mattered to them. That alone gave me hope as a transgender person. When it came to breakout sessions, I scurried over to the civic engagement tables, feeling really ready to nerd out over the topic. There, I happened to sit at the table with 3 city council policy aides. Suzanne Murphy, city council senior policy aide to Councilmember Andrew Johnson, gave me her card. I was still new to Minnesota Nice, but I could tell that she genuinely meant that I could follow up with her and do an informational interview. So that's what I did. But instead of meeting me over coffee, she invited me to City Hall and walked me through the city council office and introduced me to so many amazing people, including Andrea. That was the first time I got to meet her. And just like as an aside, when I was with Andrea, I got to meet Congressman Ellison for the first time as he was just passing in the hallway. And then he invited me to a trans equality roundtable that he was holding like the next week. So basically I was full-blown Twilight Zone at this point. So as I actually had mentioned to Suzanne that I was a former teacher and was interested in exploring youth policy. And so she graciously took me over to the mayor's office where I met Nicole Archbold, who is Mayor Hodges' senior policy aide for public safety. This was the first step in beginning to work with the mayor's office on youth issues. Going to that Trans Equity Summit changed my life. It was the clear turning moment in my life where I began down the path to where I am now, down in the mayor's office as her senior policy aide for education, youth success, and racial equity. Now I have the tremendous fortune to stand before you and to say thank you, Madam Chair, for all of your leadership and work on this and giving the space for it, and Andrea for all of your work and power. And also to thank you to all of you for your leadership in these very trying times for the transgender community. In a country that seems to be turning to hate and violence towards the trans community, I am beyond grateful to live in a city that sees us, hears us, and protects us, much the same as Attorney General Lynch said of the Obama administration. By passing this resolution, you too are on the right side of history. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for those comments. And I want to say a thank you to Mayor Hodges for her support of this work. I also want to note that this committee has had the participation of many council members and aides from council offices. And I know others who aren't actively on the committee have been very supportive of this work. Those, and I'm probably going to forget somebody, but just Suzanne Murphy from Ward 12, Jen White from Ward 7, Patrick Sadler from Ward 7, and Jen White from Ward 4. The council president's offices have been, I think, to every single meeting of this committee. And again, other council members have been very strongly supportive. We've had to turn folks away. So thank you for supporting this work that I think is some of the most important work that we are entering into on behalf of the city. We are planning right now the 3rd Trans Equity Summit that the city will host. We are also working with Property Services right now on a full enterprise review of all city facilities to ensure that we are serving all of our customers as well as employees from the transgender community and everyone as best possible, and reviewing that our facilities are friendly to everyone. Those are just some of the things that are happening that are key pieces of work. I'm going to go ahead and read this resolution and then ask if any of my other colleagues would like to make some comments. So this is the resolution of the City of Minneapolis supporting continued efforts to further transgender equity in the City of Minneapolis. Whereas the City of Minneapolis strives to be an inclusive community, and whereas Minneapolis was the first city in the nation to ban discrimination based on transgender identity when it amended its civil rights ordinance in 1975 by adding language banning discrimination based on having or projecting a self-image not associated with one's biological maleness or one's biological femaleness. And whereas Minnesota was the first state to ban discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity with the 1993 Human Rights Act, explicitly protecting the rights of transgender and gender nonconforming residents to be free from discrimination. And whereas the Supreme Court of the United States, courts throughout the nation, and federal agencies such as the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission all interpret Title VII to include discrimination on the basis of gender identity or sexual orientation. And whereas in 2014 and 2015, Minneapolis received a perfect score in the Human Rights Campaign Municipal Equality Index, an index value that evaluates how inclusive cities' laws, policies, and services are of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. And whereas much work has been done, but significant disparities still exist in virtually all areas, including employment, healthcare, safety, housing, and access to public spaces. And whereas, according to the annual report from the National Coalition of Anti-Violence Programs titled Hate Violence Against Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, Queer, and HIV-Affected Communities in the United States, released in 2015, there continues to be a multi-year trend indicating that hate violence disproportionately impacts the transgender community, particularly women, youth, and persons of color. And whereas a Minneapolis Transgender Issues Work Group was formed through action of the City Council and Mayor in March 2014 and convened thereafter to examine transgender disparities and other issues, engage the broader community, and make policy recommendations for city government designed to improve the lives of transgender residents of Minneapolis. And whereas the Minneapolis Transgender Issues Work Group is taking a systemic approach to examine transgender disparities and other issues and develop policy recommendations that could be adopted by the city, including working to develop a 2016-2017 work plan. And whereas the Minneapolis Transgender Issues Work Group hosted the first Minneapolis Trans Equity Summit in 2014 and the second annual Minneapolis Trans Equity Summit in 2015, to support and continue to raise awareness of the social, legal, and health issues critical for the transgender community. And whereas the goals of the Minneapolis Transgender Issues Work Group align with the city's goals and values, whereas the City of Minneapolis defines equity as fair and just opportunities and outcomes for all people, and whereas the City of Minneapolis wishes to continue work that will lead to equity for all people, including transgender people. And whereas the City of Minneapolis wishes to join several other cities that have adopted resolutions and policies supporting transgender equity, including Austin, Baltimore, Miami, New York City, San Francisco, Seattle, and others. Now therefore be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Minneapolis that the Mayor and City Council of the City of Minneapolis hereby support efforts to further transgender equity in Minneapolis, including but not limited to supporting efforts to continue hosting community events aimed at increasing awareness and supporting issues critical to the safety and vitality of the transgender community, supporting efforts to ensure the city's laws, policies, and services are inclusive of our transgender community and staff, and supporting efforts to create a permanent advisory body in accordance with the city's open appointment process and furtherance of the Minneapolis Code of Ordinance, Section 14.180, enabling the city to create and support organizations that enhance community engagement in the city's decision-making process. Now further be it resolved that the Mayor and City Council support other city, state, and national efforts to address, support, and protect the rights of transgender and gender nonconforming individuals throughout the nation, and be it further resolved that the Mayor and City Council hereby express their gratitude and appreciation to the Minneapolis Transgender Issues Work Group in leading efforts supporting transgender equity in Minneapolis. Thank you very much. Any comments from colleagues? Councilmember Cano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, thank you to your office and to the work group that has convened over the past couple of years to lead these efforts and help our city better address these issues. And thank you to Andrea Jenkins and to Roxanne Anderson and the Mayor's office for supporting and leading these efforts as well. I just wanted to say that I had the opportunity to use a gender-neutral bathroom for the first time when I went to the Reclaim breakfast. I think it was earlier this spring. And I felt like it was a very liberating experience, and I look forward to having that conversation in City Hall about our own bathroom policy. I will say that I'm looking forward to working with the committee around issues of sex trafficking. I know that I've raised the conversation with Roxanne Anderson about the challenges that we're facing in the trans community when it comes to sex trafficking, and my office has been convening meetings around this issue for the last year or so. And sure enough, that topic is now coming to the forefront. So I would love to be able to get the support of the work group to align those efforts and conversations that are happening around that issue, and would look forward to having your support and your help to figuring out how we can support our community members to leave the cycle of abuse and sexual exploitation and oppression that the sex trafficking component brings to Minneapolis. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Quincy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to acknowledge the work that you've done as you've led this work. I know when the first Trans Equity Summit was put together, Ms. Jenkins, of course, was in your office, so it's not like you had a choice in this matter, but I'm glad she forced this all into it.
I follow Andrea's direction.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, it's just terrific. I'd just like to remind colleagues, of course, that a couple weeks ago we passed the annual Pride resolution. And at some time we said maybe we should incorporate some of these themes into the Pride resolution, but this deserves such special attention. And so I'm very pleased you brought this forward in this way so we could have a fulsome discussion and presentation in the committee of the whole rather than just something that's a routine. And I'm just saying I think our Pride resolution is no longer routine because of the work you've done in this area. So thank you for everybody who's done that. I'm just so proud of the city when we can do this as a city council and with the mayor's office for a number of years in a row, that we're a city that leads on this topic. And when it happens in Minneapolis, it'll happen in other cities, it'll happen throughout the state, and it'll happen throughout the country because of the work we lead on this. So thank you all for being here in Minneapolis and helping us lead this charge. Thank you for your work.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Well, again, thank you very much to all who came and for your testimony, and also for the leadership of the coordinator's office. I want to say thank you because you are helping us professionalize and institutionalize the work of this committee, and I do really appreciate the commitment of the coordinator's office to helping. It creates the foundation that makes sure that this is something that will be an ongoing effort that is supported by the enterprise, and I think that is critical. So with that, I'll move passage of this resolution, the Transgender Equity Resolution. All in approval, please say aye. 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 Opposed? And that is passed unanimously. Thank you very much. All right. We have one last item that was on the agenda. This was a required report back from staff from the Workplace Partnership Group that was on the recommendations for a permanent workplace regulations partnership group. And our staff, in cooperation with Council President Johnson, have asked for one more cycle to be allowed to put together that presentation to us, as we, of course, are preparing for our special committee meeting tomorrow on the ordinance itself. So I will move postponement of this one cycle to the June 15th, 2016 meeting. All in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That item is approved. And now we have reports of committees. And our first committee is the Audit Committee with Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have three things to refer to City Council today from yesterday's Audit Committee. The first is an employee separation internal audit report. That's the analysis, the extra analysis that our audit team did on vacation and sick time and how that works with city employees. You might find out that there's wide variation in how this works. It's also tied up in 25 different labor agreements. But as we have this conversation on federal, state, and municipal levels, it's important to re-examine our own practices and our own expectations. So after review of this analysis, I think you'll agree that these policies could use some consideration. I think there may be solutions that work better for everyone and serve our city better as well. So I'm looking at the best way to take action on that, which I'll bring forward for your consideration as early as Friday. The second is the NCR Internal Audit Report. There will be a deep dive on this at Councilmember Gordon's Committee, Health, Energy, and Community Engagement. The interesting thing and why we refer this to council is it's important to see that through this review, NCR is deemed as having met their framework for the future construct and expectations. And it also provides some context as policymakers consider what might come post-2020 for the future funding of NCR, and they're doing some of that work within NCR right now. The third item is the Transportation Management Organization Internal Audit Report. That report is being referred to Transportation and Public Works. We're also providing that information to Met Council. And the third piece is to direct something that audit does, which we haven't done yet, but it is a recommendation for the mayor's future budget to make sure that we have a way to access funding to do investigative reports when needed across our enterprise. This is one of the things that we do. This is something that we've run into problems with trying to find funding for emergent issues that come up, and we just want to make sure we have a continued way to do that. So these three items will be for your consideration on Friday, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm not seeing questions, but clearly a full a lot of work from the committee. Next, we have Community Development and Regulatory Services with Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Fry chaired the committee this cycle, so I've asked if he would give the report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. We have 22 items that we'll be forwarding for this Friday. Items 1 through 8 are all land sales, which is significant given that staff has done a ton of work in getting all of these parcels off of our books. And I mean, 8 items is pretty significant. Item number 9 is a tailgating ordinance, which transitions the previous zone for tailgatings in and around the U.S. Bank Stadium. Item 10 is liquor licenses. 11 is a license settlement conference recommendations. Items 12 through 14 are rental dwelling license conditions. as well as a stipulated agreement. 15 is a modification to the Lowry Avenue redevelopment plan. 16 is exclusive development rights to MPHA for several townhomes on Riverview Road and in East 54th Street. 17 is a contract with Minnesota Home Ownership Center for counseling administrator services. 18 is an exclusive rights, development rights to Wellington Management. 19 is lease of a city-owned land at West Broadway. There are two West Broadway Business and Area Coalition, which is on West Broadway. 20 and 21 are related to veterinary services contracts. And 22 is our fiscal year 2015 Emergency Solutions Grant. Be happy to stand for any questions.
All right, thank you for that. Next, we have Health, Environment, and Community Engagement with Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. The Health, Environment, and Community Engagement Committee is bringing 9 items forward for approval. First item is passage of an ordinance amending our emergency shelters ordinance. It's relating to health and sanitation. That's in Chapter 236. Second item is adopting the Blueprint for Equitable Engagement. That's a 5-year plan that was brought forward by the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department. We also have a staff direction guiding their work into the future on that. The third item is an agreement with the University of Minnesota School of Nursing. The fourth item is a similar agreement with Winona State University. The fifth item is a contract with Wetland Habitat Restorations for the Greenway Project. The sixth item is accepting a grant from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota to support ongoing engagement about the North Minneapolis Greenway. Seventh item is accepting a grant for Energy Foundation for Energy Benchmarking Services. The eighth item is authorizing submittal of a grant to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. And the ninth item is authorizing the submittal of a grant to the Federal Department of Justice for youth violence prevention. I can take questions on any of those items. Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. There will be 3 items coming forward on Friday from the Public Safety, Civil Rights, and Emergency Management Committee. The first is accepting a pass-through reimbursement funding from Urban Scholar Partnership Organizations, Public Schools, Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, State of Minnesota, Hennepin County, and the Greater Twin Cities United Way to cover professional services and wages for the Urban Scholars programming for this year. The second item is authorizing a revenue agreement with the Twins Ballpark for the City of Minneapolis Police Department to provide some bomb unit technicians and some police officer canine handlers. The third and final item is Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension Joint Powers Agreement for Criminal Justice Data Communications Network. We'd be authorizing a 5-year agreement with the state of Minnesota for this Criminal Justice Data Communications Network. I can stand for questions on those items if there are any.
Next, we have Transportation and Public Works with Councilmember Wright.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The committee will be forwarding 18 items for full council consideration. Item 1 is the 2016 National Public Works Week, and that was a passage resolution declaring the past week through that. And then 2016 is the Protected Bikeway Program, layout approvals for the 3 areas that are listed. Item 3 is the Godfrey Parkway Bridge Replacement layout approval. Item 4 is the Minneapolis Complete Streets Policy, very significant document with a lot of work behind it that will guide our transportation project planning for years to come. The following items were reports to the Ways and Means Committee. Item 5, contract with Lindale Neighborhood Association for graffiti prevention project. Item 6 is the agreement with the Hennepin County for traffic signal system renovation project. Item 7 is the agreement with the Shingle Creek Watershed for the Cleveland Neighborhood Association Private Stormwater Management Practices Project. Item 8 is the agreement with the Metropolitan Council for bus shelter foundations on Nicollet Mall. Item 9 is the agreement with the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board for stormwater pump station easements. Item 10 is the Washington Avenue Reconstruction Project Cooperative Agreement with Hennepin County. Item 11 is a contract amendment with Minger Construction for the Hennepin-Lindale Sanitary Sewer Improvement Project. Item 12 is the grant from the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization for a project at 24th Avenue Southeast. It's an infiltration project. Item 13 is the donation from the Minneapolis Downtown Council for PV Plaza. Item 14 is the water service line repair assessment cancellation for the address listed. Item 15 is the 2017-2020 Public Works Consulting Pool. The list is provided. Item 16 is the bid for metal coated or metal seated gate valves. That's a low bid. Item 17 is accepting a low bid for lime sludge holding tank repair, and item 18 is accepting the low bid for the grit chambers for the year's work. Madam Vice President, I'll stand for questions.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Reich. Next, we have Ways and Means with Councilmember Quincy.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. We have 8 items on the agenda for Friday. First 4 are a series of legal settlements. The 5th item is a acceptance of a single bid for AVI Systems for upgrading the playback system here at City Hall. There are 2 new appointments for the Capital Long Range Improvement Committee. The 7th item is the wireless Minneapolis Community Benefits Account for Rainbow Terrace. That's a housing high-rise. And then the final item is the gift acceptance for city staff travel expenses to Sweden for a member of the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department. Happy to answer any questions on those items.
Thank you. And finally, we have Zoning and Planning with Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have 4 items from Zoning and Planning. Item number 1 is granting an appeal with conditions for a certificate of appropriateness and historic variance at 1900 Colfax Avenue South. Item number 2 is a certificate of non-conforming use appeal denying that appeal on West Broadway Avenue for a used vehicle sales operation there. Item number 3 is a rezoning at 1911 Nicollet Avenue from C1 to C2. And item number 4 is approving staff recommendation that an environmental assessment worksheet is adequate for 600 Washington Avenue Southeast. Happy to answer your questions.
All right. I am not seeing any questions. I have one announcement, which is that the council will have a closed session on Friday regarding the matter of Garcia versus Lehner and the city of Minneapolis. With that, we have concluded all of our business for today, and we are adjourned. Thank you very much.